welcome to Razz Reviews. Today I'm going to be reviewing Goodfellas. Directed by the one and only Martin Scorsese, Goodfellas is based on the novel Wiseguy by Nicholas Pileggi, and it follows the story of the rise and fall of Henry Hill, played by Ray Liotta, and it chronicles his life in the mafia from 1955 to 1980. It's one of Scorsese's most iconic films, and it gives us an inside look on how the mob actually functions and life within their society. And it's also famous or infamous for glorifying the life of a gangster. Over the years, this film has gotten a lot of acclaim, and it was actually nominated for 6 Oscars the year it came out. And it's one of my favorite films. It's one of my top 10 films of all time, and it's also my second favorite crime film after The Godfather. There's a lot to love about Goodfellas, so I'm gonna dig in, but be careful and be warned that I'm gonna have some spoilers in this review. So what makes Goodfellas so good and so iconic? Well, a lot, but here are my top 3 things that I like about Goodfellas. Number 3, the editing. The editing sometimes is actually insane. It's funny that the movie has so much cocaine in it, because I'm personally sure that the editor of this film must have been on cocaine at certain points of editing this movie. This is an extremely fast-paced movie. You're really at the edge of your seat from beginning to end. The film actually feels like a 2.5-hour trailer than a movie. He actually uses non-linear storytelling to give us this experience and ride into this world and into this lifestyle. Sometimes the movie does slow down and gives us some of the most memorable scenes in Goodfellas. One of the coolest editing techniques that happens in the film is freeze frames, which is something we don't really see a lot of these days, but Martin Scorsese uses freeze frames to give us an insight into the mind of the main character. He learns how violence and crime is actually a solution, or how crime is exciting, and also when he's older we see freeze frames that challenge those ideas that he has as a kid, especially in the opening scene of the film where the camera freezes for the first time on him, where he realizes after having done a murder that crime isn't as exciting as he thinks it is. We even have a nice freeze frame towards the end when he realizes that Jimmy might have betrayed him and he has to lose his friend and turn his back on the mob. And it mirrors that freeze frame when he was a kid, when he thought Jimmy was his friend and his new father figure. These kinds of stylistic editing techniques that the film uses is one of the reasons why it's so iconic and so different and stands the test of time. The number 2 thing I like about Goodfellas is the cinematography. Goodfellas is pretty famous for its epic, long-take, sweeping shots that take us through the world of the wise guys. That's pretty much what it's known for the most, I think. That and the gratuitous violence and the murder and the cussing. But all in all, this film visually serves the purpose of Martin Scorsese in the sense that he wants us to be intoxicated by the world of the gangsters and to understand why certain people make choices to join the mob, to join this crazy criminal lethal, life-threatening world. The movie takes time in showing us how these people live free of the shackles of society. They have luxury, they have money, they have cars, they have power, they have women, and the movie translates that visually, especially in one of the most famous shots in the movie when Henry takes Karen into the club, and it's this uninterrupted, long 3-minute take of her and us, the audience, just moving in and going into the kitchen and the entrance and then finally into the club, and it's just, you get just pulled into this world, just like the character of Karen is being pulled into this world. The number 1 thing I like about Goodfellas is the characters. You can't really lose with the epic combo of Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci and Ray Liotta. These people established iconic characters that everybody knows and scenes that are so rewatchable it's nuts. Robert De Niro's Jimmy is a character that represents the kind of life that people want to live when they think they want to be gangsters. He's this man with power and grace and luxury, and he's such a charming and powerful person that you can't help but like and want to be like. Everybody wants to be somebody, nobody wants to be nobody, everybody wants that kind of status and power. And that's what makes Henry Hill such a relatable and very intriguing character to watch. And of course we have Joe Pesci in his Oscar-winning performance as Tommy, who is this insane psychopath. What's cool about Tommy and what makes him so iconic is that he is a representation of a very important theme and idea in the mob, which is the idea of masculinity. Everybody has to prove that they're a man and they are tough and they are strong. And Tommy, being like a small built person, is the person who has the most to prove all the time. And it's funny that his need to prove his masculinity is what led them to murder someone who happens to be a made guy and a big member of the mob, and it started their actual downfall and ruined everything they have. The cool thing about Goodfellas is that these people are horrible people. They're absolute psychopath criminals. However, we somehow like them and root for them. We want them to succeed. We want them to get away with their crimes, and we want them to be rich, and we want them to have power. And that's what makes Goodfellas so memorable and so relatable to somebody who has nothing to do with the mob or crime. I can stand here and talk about the things that I liked about Goodfellas for like 3 hours, but I don't have that much time, and neither do you, so let's talk about some of the things that didn't work with the top 3 things I didn't like about Goodfellas. The number 3 thing I didn't like about Goodfellas is underdeveloped side characters. Other than Henry, Jimmy, Tommy, and Karen, we don't really know much about the other characters and the other members of the mob. They're introduced very quickly in voiceover, and some of them even just pop up and then get killed off in the next scene or 3 scenes later, and you're like, wait a minute, who was that guy again? So a lot of characters I felt didn't have as much of an impact for side characters, especially when you compare this movie to something like The Godfather, where every character and every member of the mob is so well defined and so effective. Here, some characters just show up and leave. They're like, just like that. Number 2, pacing. Some people might argue that Goodfellas is a little too fast. A lot of stuff whizzes by real quick and you get a lot of information. The problem with this high speed is the fact that it compromises the emotional intensity of the film. Except for the bond and the relationship between Henry, Tommy, and Jimmy, this film is not highly emotional. And that's because of the high speed and high octane. We don't have time to stop and feel anything. Even though the film is full of tragic events where people die and lose everything they have, but you never really feel it. Number 1 thing I don't like about Goodfellas is too much information. A lot of plot developments and events get passed over very quickly that you kind of get confused and you don't know what's going on. The plot of Goodfellas is not something that you can keep up with the first time around. It's kind of a rewatchable film if you are to understand all the little things that happen in terms of story. A big example of this for me is the robbery that they pull off. It took me 4 viewings to actually understand what they were robbing and how they pulled it off, because we never actually see it, but they talk about it really fast. I feel like Goodfellas is the kind of film that after you watch it for the first time, the only thing you're left with is Joe Pesci's hilarious monologues and a lot of blood and violence, and that's it. Other than that, that's pretty much all the flaws that I can talk about when it comes to Goodfellas, because this movie is an incredible film. For me, it's one of the best films Martin Scorsese has ever done, and it definitely stands the test of time and competes with crime films being done today, which is amazing, because it's not just the story of crimes and criminals and violence and gore, because it's an introduction to a world done in the most beautiful language of cinema by such an amazing director who has such a cool and clear vision and an incredible way of telling a story, and also it's fun and entertaining as hell. And it's also so rewatchable. I love Goodfellas. I've seen it 100 times. I can probably see it 100 more, and I'm gonna give it a 9.5 out of 10. So, have you seen Goodfellas? When have you seen it recently? What is your favorite scene of Goodfellas? Let me know in the comment section below. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And let me know what you'd like me to review for you next. See ya!